Hi guys, welcome back to Let's Talk with Brian and Tia. We are so excited because this is our second episode. So
Episode
thank you to
2.
everyone who's watched our first episode. And if you haven't, go back and catch
Appreciate you
up
guys.
and jump in. So we're gonna start off with answering the questions that you guys send us in our DMs or our YouTube comments or Instagram comments or text messages. So we're going to start off every episode with answering a couple of questions just to give you guys our insight on what you want to know.
Definitely. So keep the Q&A questions coming. We love the participation. It's fun for us to go through these questions. And definitely after each episode, give us your feedback on the questions that we answered. And if you guys want us to go in more details in future episodes. So Q&A question number 1 this week. How many times a week should a couple have sex? This person said they believe every day. They wanted to know our thoughts. What do you think, T?
I think it just depends on the couple. Some couples have kids, some couples are really busy with demanding jobs. So I think it's not fair to put the pressure on saying a number. I think you just fill it out and see what works for your relationship.
Definitely, I agree. Sometimes it's not an opportunity to have sex every day, but you want to make sure that you're at least intimate daily, right? And that could
Mhm.
sometimes mean just ensuring that you touch, kiss, hug, love on each other in some shape, form, or fashion. So I do
Mhm.
agree that you should do that every day. Sex, you do it as frequently as you can, and kind of what works for the person. Sometimes people have higher sex drives,
Mhm.
lower sex drives. So you definitely want to keep those things in mind when you're talking about how frequently you should have sex.
Yeah, I agree.
Question number 2 this week. What is a good solution to getting through tough times in a relationship?
Hmm. I think that's pretty broad. I feel like we've had a lot of tough times and there's been a lot of different solutions of getting through tough times. But I think overall is accountability.
Oh,
Um,
that's good.
Thinking about what role you play during those tough times, to make sure you're not just putting it all on one person because a relationship takes two people. So
100%.
you want to make sure you're figuring out what can I do? What can you do to bring this together for us to collectively get through this tough time?
Definitely. And to piggyback on that, it's cliche and we've talked about it in Q&A 1 and episode 1. Like you gotta communicate. You gotta be transparent with your partner. Like usually tough times happen because someone's not saying something. You
Mhm.
get to that space because you're holding something in, or
Mhm.
you're not talking, or you're not being honest, and then it builds.
Yeah.
And once it gets to a head, obviously it makes it really difficult to get through the time when you passed up all these times where you haven't said anything. So
Yeah.
you want to make sure you're always talking and communicating with your partner, to alleviate it becoming a really, really tough time, because you're gonna have tough times
Yeah.
throughout the relationship. And when those tough times come, as long as you're talking and communicating, I think you'll be okay.
Yeah.
And our last question for this week is, how can you get your partner to be open to your needs and or wants?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I would say you want you well first you have to start with being honest with your needs and wants, but it's really difficult because it depends on the space your partner is in, right? So we
Mm,
can't force our partners to be open to our needs and wants. Our job is simply to be honest with ourselves about our needs and wants and relay that message over to our partner, but understand depending on the space our partner is in, they may not be able to deliver that to us. So you kind of got to set a tone in your relationship of being honest with each other, communicating with one another, and things like that. But you have to know that if your partner may not be able to show up for your needs and wants, and that's another conversation.
definitely. And being okay, if that is the case, obviously being okay doesn't mean that you're going to be happy about it,
Hmm.
but being okay meaning that you understand where that person is,
Hmm.
and then may not being able to fulfill your needs and wants at that time, and or maybe not for that relationship.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? A lot of it boils down to, like you mentioned, when getting to that space where you accept yourself, accept what you need and what you want, and not changing it because the
Hmm.
person's not fulfilling it,
Hmm.
and being able to get to a place where you may need to move on if that's the case.
Yeah.
That kind of segues into our segment for this week, the idea of acceptance.
Yes.
And so acceptance is a huge part of a relationship when you talk about getting someone to be aware of what your needs and wants are, right?
Mhm.
You have to get to a place of one, accepting yourself, but two, accepting that person when they may not respond to what your wants and needs are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How would you say that we've gotten to that place of acceptance?
Oh, it's been a journey. I would say that we've gotten to that place of acceptance by truly understanding what we need from the relationship
Hmm.
and separating the fact that what you need from the relationship is not what I need from the
Yeah,
relationship. We need different things. So when you go into, some of you may or may not have heard of like love language, right? So the way you need to be loved is not the same way that I may need to be loved.
right.
And accepting our accepting ourselves and accepting that what we want today is not what we wanted initially, and so being able to grow from that. And so for me, I just had to think about what it is that I needed for my life, in a sense, because there was a space and time in our relationship where yeah, you were there and you were doing all the right things, but it felt robotic.
Mm,
It felt like it was the same thing every day. And for me, I need adventure. I
mhm.
need, unorthodox situations. I need something that's different sometimes every day in some sense. And you
Right,
like structure. You
right.
like to be controlled. You like to be here. And for a long time, you might not need, or you might need that I might not need. So being able to respect that from one another, I think truly have brought me to the space of being accepting of who you are in our relationship.
Definitely. I would say for me, like you mentioned, accepting myself first and also not giving a damn if you did or didn't.
Mm, yeah.
You know what I mean? Get into that place of truly saying that who I am is who I am. Now,
Yeah.
if me and Tia, we've been together for 15 years and she doesn't like it, then it may be a place for us to say, okay, well, maybe we need to go in separate directions.
Hmm.
Truly get into that space of accepting that
Yeah.
was how I was able to also accept you. Because if I'm gonna say I'm cool with me and I'm okay with myself, I have to just also be okay with you and who
Yeah.
you are. And I feel like I got to know you over again as I started to accept you for who you was, and that made it almost like a fun process too, almost like
Yeah.
redating. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Relearning a new person. So
Yeah.
it doesn't always have to be this stringent, hard process when you talk about accepting someone. If you are able to, you know, do it in a way that makes it fun or
Yeah.
makes it new, you can find, goodness in it.
Yeah. You can relax in it. And
Absolutely.
it could feel so new. It could feel so good. Because I remember that space I was in at one point in our relationship where I knew that I eagerly, and it was like almost like I was thirsty to find myself and to save myself. And I was so much more important than trying to hold on to something that didn't feel good to me at
Right.
that point. You know what I mean? So it was like, I knew I loved you. I knew that I wanted to be with you. I knew that when I closed my eyes, I can see you in my future. But what we were going through at the time, it just didn't feel good to me.
Mm,
I didn't feel like I was being true to myself. I felt like I was just here and I was with you, but it was like I I couldn't breathe in a sense. You know what I
right.
mean? And I know I needed so badly to save myself
Mm,
first. And that was so important to me. But obviously, I'm blessed that coming to you and getting through that time, I truly feel like right now I have myself and I hold on to myself
right.
in the midst of us being in a relationship. Because at one
Definitely.
point it was us, but it was no me.
Right. And I think once you actually truly get to that space, you can find peace and also value in what that person brings to the table, right?
Hmm.
Because before you're looking at everything that they're not doing, right? Everything oh my God, I wish they would be more like this or more like that so they can be more like me. When it's like, no, allow them to be themselves. And what things do you truly value about that other person?
Yeah. Do you remember the time when you felt when because I know you talked about initially you were so controlling and kind of wanted things to be a certain way, so you felt like your way or the highway in a sense, that old saying. But do you remember or vaguely remember the switch you had to where you felt like, okay, she might not do things my way, but the value that she brings to the household or the relationship. Do you remember how that made you feel or the moment?
I don't remember the exact moment. It's funny, like when things like switch, it seemed like it's been the way you've done it the whole time,
I
even though
know.
that's not true.
I know. It's
But
like, no, it's this way. It's like, oh,
that's
you don't
how I
remember
feel now. It's hard to remember
the
when the
hard
switch
times.
happened
Yeah.
because this feels so much better. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I've almost let go of how it used to be.
Yeah.
And also I'm continuously trying to build the right habits, trying to remember what it's like or what the old way was like. It just doesn't feel good to go back to, like
Yeah.
remembering those
True.
thoughts and those feelings. You know what I mean? Like, can we have those conversations if necessary? Yeah, but to just sit and think about when that time was, it's hard to remember when the switch app actually happened. I'm just glad that it did, truthfully.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Same.
Definitely, because I feel like for a long time I was comparing you to this idea
Mm,
of what I wanted you to be. And it wasn't working. I literally would just be frustrated because you would not need it.
mm-hmm,
You couldn't get to it, but you would never get to it because that's not you. You don't
mm-hmm,
tick that way. You don't operate that way. You
mm-hmm,
don't work that way.
mm-hmm.
You know what? I take that back. In saying what I just said, made me think about as you started to study astrology
Oh yeah.
and learning about people's tendencies and personalities. I think that was the initiation for me accepting you. It was like, well, dang, this she's literally the opposite of me. So there's no way she's going to be able to do things the way that I do things. That was the beginning of it.
Mm.
I remember now. Yep, that's exactly what it was. Definitely. Do you remember? Or was it anything for you that made you feel like, well, hey, I'm ready to accept, I'm ready to, move differently or move forward in a different way?
I don't even know if it was so much with you. I just decided to say, and I'm not recommending this for recommending this to everyone, but I just was like, I can be an extremist sometimes. I was just like, you know what? Fuck this. I came in the house, I did the bare minimum for the household. I'm like, okay, the kids gonna eat, we gonna eat, the house gonna be clean, we gonna do this. I'm gonna come home from work, we gonna be straight. But I just dove so far deep into myself that I just was tunnel vision. I was like,
Mm,
I spent so much time of my life just engulfed in our relationship, like
yeah,
trying to make it work, trying to meet standards, trying to be here for you. And I woke up one day and I was like, I have never done that for myself before.
yeah,
I have never spent the time that I've spent in this relationship at a job, on any my friends, anyone. I've never spent that much time finding out who a Tia was, finding out and being comfortable and sitting with myself. I've never done that.
yeah,
And so I just was like, you know what? I'm throwing all y'all to the back. You, friends, family, everyone, I'm just going to figure out who I am. And I spent so much time inside of my head, inside of my heart, inside of myself, really figuring out who I was. And I remember that moment. I just was like, I can't, I don't know. I hope you're fine. You know what I mean? But once I did that, I found the compassion and the love and the patience for you as a human being, not my husband, not my boyfriend, not the person who's father of my child, just for who you were. And I was able to connect in a different way.
yeah. And I remember that transition for you because I remember feeling like I was on the outside looking in. I remember feeling like there we weren't spending a lot of time together. I remember
Mhm.
feeling like, you know, you know, being by myself a lot. But when I felt like that, a part of it felt right,
Mm.
which is why I think I didn't get upset or we didn't fight during those times. A part of it felt right. Like it seemed like you were trying to figure out what the hell you were gonna do, and not just within our relationship, but like with your life individually as a
Mhm.
Tia, not as my wife.
Yeah.
And so, I had to take the back seat at that time. Like I said, it didn't feel comfortable, but it felt right.
Yeah.
It felt right. Um, I know this week we had a couple friends asking us about the idea of like men and where men are supposed to be and how they're supposed to be, or how I am as a man versus how men are supposed to be. Do you want to kind of share some of your thoughts on?
Yeah, I think that it's his idea sometimes that a couple that I think it's a constant conversation I've had through the years with a lot of girlfriends. But since we kind of pushed this forward, this is a topic that I think probably won't be the last time we talk about it. But the idea of the macho man, the idea of what a man should be. And I think a lot of women feel when they get in a relationship with a man, that as soon as they say, okay, you're my girlfriend or you're my fiance, my wife, it's this idea of possessiveness and ownership.
Mm,
I think people in general do it, but I talk to mostly women. I mean, and so women talk about how they feel. I get in a relationship. Oh, you can't wear that dress. I get in a relationship. Oh, you can't talk to this person. And so I think it's a lot of women who find themselves losing their identity in their relationship because it's almost like a set of rules
yeah,
once you get married or
right.
once you become a girlfriend. It's like, oh, you can't go to this place. Oh, I can't go to that place. This might seem extreme, but one of my friends talked about how when she was married, her husband literally she was with her husband, they saw another friend of theirs out, which was a man, and he made a joke and she laughed at the joke. And he was like pissed, like, what are you laughing about?
Right.
And it made me think of the idea of, I feel like another friend told me something like this too, where the guy kind of thought, like, are you flirting with him? Are you like him? And it's like this idea of like once you are a wife or once you're a woman, it's a role you're supposed to play,
Definitely. I think
and it takes, not to cut you off, but it takes yourself out the equation, which a
for
lot of
sure.
women end up very, very unhappy.
Right. I mean, a lot of us, I think, when we talk about relationships, try to fit in this box of what we think relationships are, or what we see in relationships are supposed to be, whether that's TV or who our parents, really, our aunties,
Hmm.
uncles, family members. So we have our ideas and ideologies about relationships. And
Hmm.
I think for men specifically, we see other men in our lives or men we've been around and we've seen how they behaved, and we think that that's how a man
Should be.
should be, right? You're supposed to, she yours, she's not nobody else's, and if somebody else is looking at her, then it shouldn't be that way, right? So
Hmm.
I think that's the first part. The second part, I think, is our insecurity sometimes as men, right? Like we don't want someone to have our girl or our woman, so we think that if she's laughing or talking to that means that she's entertaining that person.
Hmm.
And oftentimes when we talk about the person being an individual, like laughing at someone else's joke is just it's separate from your relationship.
Hmm.
It has nothing to do with your relationship. And so if we reeling it back in and we talk about trust, if you truly trust your partner, that wouldn't be something that made you feel any type of way when you talk about her laughing at someone else's joke. So I think it boils down to men's ideas and what they grow up learning as a man, and then their insecurities that come along with that. Because usually we build those insecurities through our beliefs that we get when we're young from
Hmm.
men.
Do you feel like you've ever felt, or can you remember a time that you were in that space with me? Or
For
like a
sure.
specific example. If you can't think, I mean, it's been so long, I
Right.
can't.
No,
hold
yeah,
you to
I
that.
think I think one situation I remember specifically. We were at a casino, and you were me and you were walking out the casino, and there were like these older men,
Mhm.
and they were like, making comments like, "Oh, she pretty or she bad. Look at her body," and I immediately flipped. Like I was hot. Like I was upset that they were gawking and making comments about you. Um, Almost as if you were my property. You know what I mean? Like, and obviously there's also a level of safety and
Respect.
respect that
I feel
comes
like
with
they
that.
were a little disrespectful.
Absolutely, which is the reason why I said something to them.
Yeah.
I think that they were, obviously being a little inappropriate in how they were responding, seeing that you and I were together, right?
Hmm.
But there's still this idea that we could have just ignored the shit and kept walking.
True.
You know what I mean? Like I didn't necessarily have to give them my energy simply because they said something about you. A
Yeah.
lot of that energy that I gave them was because I felt like you were mine and they shouldn't have been looking.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So, in hindsight, obviously, I wouldn't have said anything. I would have kept walking and we would just would have walked out and went on about our business. But that's one moment that I remember that stands out where I felt not necessarily insecure, but I felt like I was, protecting your honor for some crazy reason that didn't even make any sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I think that it ties into that idea. I know
Hmm.
for me, I've done a a very conscious effort of trying to reverse that,
Hmm.
simply because the idea of a man for me, the initial one is you have of your dad, right? And my dad wasn't in my life the way I would have wanted him to be.
Hmm.
So I've always thought to try to do the exact opposites of everything he did, right?
Hmm.
Make sure I'm in my kid's life, make sure I'm taking care of my wife, making sure I'm here and being at the house and helping with the laundry and helping with food. And I just wanted to do the opposite. I wanted to
Hmm.
make sure that I was present in a way that he never was.
Hmm.
And that motivated me a lot to be in that space.
Hmm. It's interesting. I appreciate that. I think sometimes with with that, I think when you are motivated to be the opposite of something,
Yeah,
sometimes it can cross over to be over excessive or
definitely.
obsessive or
Yes.
controlling. And so I think there's small areas in our life where that kind of bled over because I felt like as much as we talk about a man feeling like there's a role they should play. I think also sometimes when you label yourself as a woman, as wife or mother, you feel like this is my territory and you don't have any business coming over
Right.
into it.
Right.
Not that you can't help me sometimes, but I think sometimes trying to tell me certain things, like I think the dishes should be stacked this way. It's like,
Right.
get out the kitchen and go to work.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's those type of things. But I think labels really um divide divide people in relationships more
For
than they
sure.
think they do. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? Because even if it's a silence, even if you're being silent about it, you know what I mean? By saying like, okay, you're the woman, I'm the man, you're the wife. And so you lose your individuality in a
Hmm.
relationship. And that can be really uncomfortable and it can be really detrimental to the marriage or the relationship if you're not married. But it could be really, really harmful to the relationship and the companionship that you have with someone. You can lose that. And so it's no longer the emotional connection. It's just the roles that we're playing.
Right.
And that can get really tricky.
No, definitely. I think that's one of those things where again, you learn it. You learn that as a man, you should be doing certain things. As a
Hmm.
woman, you should be
Should be
doing
doing certain
certain
things.
things, right? And we're not taught to actually um, find out what it is that we actually like to do and be good at that,
Yes.
right? Like if you may be the woman in a relationship and you're good with the money
Mm.
and you're good with handling the bills and taking care of certain finance things. That's quote unquote to be a man's job, right?
Yeah.
But those are the ways that we've been taught and learned as we were growing up. But when you truly get to the place where you accept the person for who they are, you can step back and actually ask, yo, what are you good at?
Yeah.
What do you bring to the table and what do you do well?
Yeah.
and then you go do that, and
Yeah.
let me do what
Do what
I
I
do
do
well.
well.
And that may be, I'll never forget. I didn't realize how much you did until I was at home. I remember when Brian was maybe, I don't know, 6, 7 months, and I was at home when I was transitioning into real estate. Being at home, a stay-at-home parent is tough. That shit is hard work. You might as well be at work for the amount of work you start as soon as the baby wake up. And that shit don't end
Ain't
until
no
the
lunch.
baby go to sleep. Ain't no lunch break. Ain't no. It doesn't end.
You know, 15-minute.
And seeing that and experiencing that firsthand made me truly understand and realize what being a stay-at-home mom really meant. That shit is tough work, and I would never frown upon a stay-at-home mom just because she doesn't go to work, because she is working. She's just not at a job. You know what I mean? And
With
it's a lot
Bob
of work.
telling her what to do.
Exactly. And so being able to understand and grow into that space of accepting the person for what they bring to the table is important, because it'll allow you guys to quote unquote compromise,
Yeah.
right? Or be aware of, right? Because
you don't want to compromise.
You don't want to compromise, because the idea of compromise is you giving something up, and you don't have to. Sometimes you're just aware of what that person does, and you allow them to do it, so you guys can actually flourish as a union, right? Absolutely, definitely. But I think overall, as we continue to discuss these topics, I think they all have a common um, core, and it really boils down to that acceptance, that communication, that transparency, being in that space of being able to accept the person for what they do and what they bring to the table, and not comparing each other.
Yes.
You don't do this, I do that.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so as we continue to share on topics, I hope that we're at least sharing those ideas with people, that acceptance is very important. And as you continue to get better at it, as accepting the other person and yourself, it'll allow your relationship to continue to move in the right direction.
Yes, absolutely. So if you guys have any questions about what we talked about this week, please send us your DMs. Send us a question in our DMs, or leave a comment in the YouTube channel below or Instagram. But please make sure you like, share, subscribe if you really thought this video was helpful tonight.
Definitely can't wait to see you guys next week. And as I mentioned, we'll continue to do our Q&As before every segment, so continue to send those questions over. Can't wait to see you guys next week.